Whenever you're ready, just introduce yourself. Look at me and start a conversation.
Well, I'm Pauline Messenger from Sunderland. I am 71 years old, born and bred in Sunderland, and I was born in Silksworth, Pitt Village, and my father was self-employed, which had a lot of impact on me because I was very interested in business. From a 3-year-old, he would give me jobs, and he would take me, sit me on the bank counter when he paid in, fascinated at the woman with the sponge flicking the money. Little did I realise that 16 years later I'd be sitting behind that counter in Midland Bank in Fawcett Street in Sunderland, and I worked there for 16 years. And Dad had taught me accounts from the age of 12, which came into good standing when, after I'd had my first son at 32, 6 years later, me and my husband bought a hotel, the Pullman Lodge, Seaburn, and we ran it and owned. I mean, we were physically hands-on 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for 14 years. It was hard, but I realised that my life, my hobbies, because I had been a member of Ladies' Circle, he was Round Table, and I had organised functions, I'd done charity events, I'd done fellowship events, I'd done treasurer, chairman. I even went and did area treasurer. So when we came to the hotel, I'd done everything, and it was a doddle. I knew how to cater for events, everything. The only thing I've never done is pull a pint, because I don't drink, and I hadn't a clue as far as alcohol went. So the bar was not my domain. But I'd done my dad's accounts in fact I'd done his and my future husband beforehand, because he'd had a business. And so besides working in the bank, I'd always had a hand in with accounts. And I did all the back work in the hotel. I did all the paperwork, everything. And unfortunately, my husband liked to taste the stuff. And so in 2004, I decided my health was suffering, obviously, the pressure of work, the stress, and also the stress of the relationship. And so I asked for a divorce, and it was hard because I had a big fight on my hands. I'd already had, in the year 2000, our assistant manager had stolen a lot of money from us, and we had 3 years court case, which had taken its toll big time. And at 3 days before Crown Court, I had been told by my husband, he woke me at 2:45 in the morning, to tell me he'd had a 5-year affair with her. And so I had to go into Crown Court. I actually got up that night, went and sat downstairs and thought, what am I going to do? Do I kick him out, or do I stand by him? And I thought, we had a court case to fight. We had to stay united.
So, just for my clarification, he admitted to having a 5-year affair with the person that you had the court case with, which could have dramatically impacted that case.
Yes, and also the detectives didn't want me to find out in court about the affair, because obviously they didn't know what my reaction would be. So they had given him 3 days to tell me, and they said if he didn't tell me, they would tell me.
So they've uncovered it and confronted him, and he's been forced into that position.
Yes.
Okay.
So
it certainly sounds like a drama. It sounds like something
Oh, yes.
It sounds like something you would see dramatised somewhere these days, wouldn't
Yes,
you?
yes.
So this was your life.
Yes. And so I had decided then I would stand by him. But I said if it happened again, then that was it. And we were on a Mediterranean cruise, out at sea, and he was in the gym, and I had gone to make a phone call. My sister lived in the same street as I did, and I would always keep a check on her girls if they were away. But unfortunately, both of us were away at the same time, so I thought I'd just give them a ring. My phone had no charge, and I went to use his phone, and something said, look at the numbers. And when I did, there was one specific number over and over again. And I thought, right, okay, well, if it's anything to do with work, if I rang them, they would tell me. But when I did ring, it was deathly hush. And I said, right, when I get home, we'll have this out. And let's just say all hell let loose when I got home. I picked my moments I'd learned from the previous. I thought, right, I need my facts. And so this Monday, the Monday we got back, he had gone off to do the banking, and it was almost 3 o'clock at the end of her shift. And I went down and I just asked to see her in my office. And I said, right, I want to know what's going on. And then after she told me, she was still in my office, I heard the beep of his car alarm. He was back in the car park. And I rang and I said, oh, could you just pop up to the office? Oh, yeah, no problem. That's where I was coming. Okay. And he came up, and as soon as he saw her, he knew that was it. And we had mega rows. It was unbelievable. And he wouldn't get out of the house. He just stood his ground. I realised then just how bad a narcissist can be. And he likes to win. But I was determined. And I just stayed calm, got the facts together. He told the solicitor he had no money, no pensions, no nothing. I actually had the policies. I did the paperwork. I knew exactly what was what. And so I presented everything. And eventually, I mean, he tried to put it into liquidation. He tried to bankrupt us. He said if he didn't get all the money, then I was getting nothing. He would rather it just all go. And this day, I went away. My next door neighbours, she could see what it was doing to me. And because I developed unstable angina at the time. And she said, look, go away. She says, my sister's got a cottage in Teesdale. She said, go away for a few days. And boys were with the dad. And so I said, right, okay. And I went away and I meditated, I prayed, I walked, talked to God, because he's very much a part of my life. And I said, you know, this is so unfair. I said, we'd worked 14 years. We'd put everything into this business. And I said, for it to just go, we had a diary of appointments. I said, and I had a figure in my head, what I felt was not asking too much. It was sort of for what would pay the mortgage, the bills, because yes, when I asked for the divorce, he stopped paying, because I'd had to walk out. It was so violent. And he sent the bailiff to me, and I had to clear my house out. And I lived with 2 beds and 1 chair, nothing else in the house, for 3 weeks. And then one day, I'd had 32 calls from the accountant saying, you know, what we're doing and trying to sort it out. And then suddenly he said, do you realise he hasn't even told his solicitor what's going on? I said, right, that's it. Call his bluff. I've had enough. And I did. I called his bluff and he presented the cheque. And then later that day I got a text saying, from my youngest son saying, Mum, Dad says you can put your furniture back. And I thought, if that's not emotional blackmail, what is? And so I, after this praying when I was away, and I got home on the Thursday. And the Thursday night I got a phone call and it said, are you aware there's an offer in for the business? I said, no. They said, well, could we meet for lunch? I said, yeah, of course we can. And I met him and he described my dad. He said, if you like your dad, you're honest, you're upfront, you're trustworthy. I said, oh yeah, I'm my dad's daughter. He trained me. I said, I'm my dad's daughter. And he said, okay, well, he said, I would like to do dealings with you. And he told me about the offer. And I said, right, okay, well, I'll see, obviously speak to the solicitor, what have you. And then the next day I'd gone shopping. I had to get some food shopping. When I came back, big Mercedes outside my door, two big strapping men. And I thought, okay, what's going on? And I went inside, didn't speak to them or anything, knock at the door. Are you aware we've put an offer in for the business? No. Okay, well, we want you to know. I said, okay. He said, we didn't realise your husband made us believe it was just his business, but we now realise it's 50-50. I said, oh yes, it's certainly 50-50. So over the next week, it ended up there was 5 fighting for the business. We hadn't even advertised it. And I hung out. I'd go to the solicitor, or he would ring me, and I'd say, have you asked if there's any more offers? No, I'll just ring them. Another offer would come in. We actually got what I asked God for. And when I got that, I said, right, we'll accept the offer. And it was sold. And he argued, he contested everything. And it was just money. The winners were the barristers and the solicitors. And this final day we went in and we were arguing over this amount. And they were saying, right, we need forensic accountants, we need this, we need that. And I went back to the room and I said to my barrister, I'd sat and worked it out, and I thought, well, if that's taken 6 weeks, this is doing this, I thought there's going to be nothing left. We'll be fighting over nothing and who's won by it. And I just said, right, okay, go back and say he can have it. She says, you've won. She says, when you don't let money be the key thing, you've won. Because that's what he could manipulate me with. And I just said, right, okay, I'll walk away. And so as I say, I'd previously had to walk out of the business because I'd phoned the solicitor this day. He was very abusive, very because he would lean over, he's 6'2", in my face, and he would corner me. And he was really nasty. And I'd rang the solicitor and I said, look, if I carry on here, I'll not be here. I said, this is really affecting my health. And I said, my son, he was 9, needs his mum. My eldest son was with his dad. His dad was actually using him. He was giving him the bullets to fire. And I said, can I walk out? I said, I know he'll fleece me, but I'm not bothered. I said, my health comes first. And he said, yeah, walk out. So I went home. So I not only was losing the business, my job, my husband, my eldest son, I almost lost the house. And I thought, what do I do? The next day a syllabus came through the door and I opened it holistic therapies. I thought, do you know, I've always been interested in that. I thought, I'm going to sign up. So at 50, I went to college, and I did for what is the equivalent to 4 A-levels in holistic therapies. And shortly before I qualified, we had a Russian lady called Victoria, and she claimed she was a white witch. And she introduced me to angels. And I was very skeptical. And I thought, okay, you know, just, we'll take it, we'll keep her amused. And the following week was half term, and I was going to America with my son to stay with friends. It was my birthday, and I would have been at home because he was now racing. His dad was taking him go-karting, because that was one way to get him away from me. And so anyway, we'd gone to America, and when we got on we had to change at Amsterdam, and when we got on the plane, the person sitting next to Paul leant over, and she told us her name. She says, I'm a holistic therapist, and I work with the angels. Oh, I says, that's funny that, because I said, I've just been introduced to the angels, and I'm training to be a holistic therapist. She talked all the way to America about angels and holistic therapies. And when I got off, I was quite amazed at the synchronicities of this. And I told my friend. And that week, everywhere we went, there was angels. And she actually bought me a hand-carved angel wings for my birthday while I was there. And when I came back, I got a text saying, would I like to be trained to be an angelic Reiki master? And I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, you know, you don't know these things. I thought, these things have happened for a reason. So I thought, okay, why not? And so I trained. I did the 1 and 2 Reiki, and then I went on to do my Grand Masters. And when I came out after I qualified, there's a lot of long words and a lot of rituals and everything. And I just spoke to Spirit and I said, right, okay, you know, I don't remember names very well. And I said, I'm not very good with all this paraphernalia. If I tell you when I need you, can you send me who is perfect for the job? And that is how we've been for 21 years. And I have helped many, many people. I've healed, and one in particular I'll tell you about was I had been ill, and I hadn't been practicing at the time, and someone said, would I do a voluntary, they were doing a drop-in taster session, would I do it? And I said, go on then, you know, if it's just for a few hours, yes, I'll do it. And that morning I woke up and I could hear Spirit saying, make an effort. At the time I didn't wear makeup because my skin was very reactive. It said, put something on that will make you stand out. So I had a royal blue dress. So I put it on, put the makeup on, the hair up, and I thought, right, okay, well, if I don't stand out now, then, because normally I would wear black. So anyway, off I went. I did some healing, and then this lady appeared. She had a broken arm, and she sat down, and I started the healing because I channeled that they would use me as a vessel. And suddenly I couldn't swallow, and that it was getting harder and harder, and I felt as if I was choking. And I thought, well, if this gets any worse, I'm going to have to stop the healing. This is getting unbearable. And just then, as I thought that, it eased off. And I finished the healing, and I turned around and I said, and we started to talk, and I explained this sensation I had as if I was being choked, and a very quiet voice said, "That's how she died." I said, "Who?" She says, "My mum." She says, "My stepdad made her take an overdose and then he strangled her." She says, "I was 4 and I hid because," she says, "I knew he would do that to me and my brother."
Oh, goodness.
And I said, "So, to the police?" She says, "Well," and I said, "Is he still out there?" She says, "I feel as though he's no longer there." And she said, "You know, I was keep getting breaks." I says, "Yes, you'll not get them now." I says, "You needed to release it." For 51 years, she'd kept that to herself. And my eyes had filled with unshed tears. And I said to her, I said, "So what's with the unshed tears?" She says, "I was told I wasn't allowed to cry." I said, "Right, okay, I get that." And we sat and talked for quite a while. And that is how I follow my guidance and I'm able to heal people. So I kept doing the Reiki and helping. I help people every day. I come across people. They just seem to appear or I seem to go where there's somebody who needs help. And in 2016, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got the awful call to say, the call every parent rates, that my son was dead. It was my youngest son telling me. And he'd died instantly in a road accident in Dubai. And that, I couldn't believe it at first. it had to be repeated. And when I put the phone down, I suddenly became aware that I was just rocking all the time. I couldn't stop rocking. And it made me realise, when you see the news or anything where there's tragedies and they've lost children, the women tend to rock backwards and forwards. And I think it's the baby. It's your baby you've lost. Because I really felt part of my heart had gone with them. And I've since discovered that a child's DNA stays in the mother and the mother's DNA is in the child. So that's how the connection is there, and how sometimes your mother might ring you and you think, "Oh, how did she know?" If you're not very good or something's happened. And this is why, because we have that telepathic thing with the child. And all I was doing was just rocking. And then I had to get into action mode. And I had to pack a case. I had to get a flight. I rang Emirates. The only ticket available was business class, which was 2,200. And I think 4 or 5 times I asked them, "Are you sure you haven't got economy?" "No, definitely not." I thought, well, I've got to be on that flight. I've got to go. And so I paid it. I couldn't get hold. Paul couldn't get hold of his dad. I couldn't get hold of him for 5 hours. I had to, in fact, I rang a very good friend. She came up from Sunderland because I was now living in Weardale. And she phoned her daughter, who went and knocked at his door and asked if he could ring me. So obviously I had to be the one to tell him about the death. And when I got to Newcastle Airport, he was sitting waiting. Now, when you've been married to a narcissist, you don't really want to be sitting on a flight with him. You don't really want to talk to him. But never mind, we sat. Obviously, the loss was both of our loss. And he was in economy. When he'd rang 5 hours later, there was a ticket in economy. Now to me, that was the universe, God, saying, you don't have to sit with him for 7.5-hour flight. We'll make sure you've got the care.
Yeah.
And there was the air hostess who, three hours into the flight, when I couldn't stop the tears, and everybody around me, it was dark, the lights were down, and I was stuffing the hanky in my mouth to keep quiet, but I was sobbing. And this air hostess came and she said, can I help you? She says, can you talk about it, or do you want me to just hold your hand? I says, I would rather talk to you. I says, I need to talk. And she knelt beside me, held my hand, and talked to me for 3.5 hours. I couldn't have got through that flight without her. And they actually got us off the plane before anybody else was allowed to disembark, and our cases were waiting. And we got there, and it was one of the hardest weeks in my life. It took, we landed early hours Sunday morning. It was Wednesday morning before we got to see his body. The police wouldn't release the paperwork, and we got it at 5:30 on the Tuesday night, which was too late to go to the mortuary. We had to go twice to the mortuary. I was told to go and sit behind a screen, which I found quite difficult. My son said, no, come on, Mum, you're standing with me. And my son was presented to me on a trolley in the middle of the corridor in a body bag. And it was such a shock. I'd been with my mum, my dad, my brother when they'd passed. But to see your actual son, and it wasn't like our body bag with the zip. It was like muslin, and above his head there was a tuft like this where they'd gathered the material, and that's all I could see. And a big piece of gauze behind his head. And he said, the mortician, he said, you must hurry. It was 52 degrees outside. He says, you must hurry. We can't keep this here. And so I think we had 2 minutes in total before the wheeled him away. I didn't know if that was the only time I'd get to see him. As it happens, we had to go the next day to the mortuary, and we had to sign to say the body that was being transferred from the mortuary into the ambulance was Stephen. We then had to follow it to the embalmer, and then we had to wait till his body was embalmed to verify that the body in the coffin, before they sealed it, was Stephen. We then had to go to Emirates Cargo to book his coffin on the flight that we were going home on. And we went 3 courts to get Paul power of attorney, just in case when we came home there was anything cropped up. We had to go and change the license on his car. We had to do there was so much. We had to go to British Embassy to cancel his passport. There was so much we crammed into those days, and we only had Friday. Nobody works, so we had just those couple of days to get everything done. On the Thursday night, he was a biker, and the War Pigs did a memorial ride through Dubai. It was 40 bikes. So Paul got his boss's truck, and him and I and his dad were following behind. And as we sat, his dad was filming the bikers outside, and Paul and I were waiting, and suddenly we saw this biker come towards us with white shades on. Now, you never see a Harley Davidson with white sunglasses. It's all black. This biker was and I goes, gosh, it's Stephen. And I'll tell you what my son said, and he shouted out, and he couldn't believe it. we never saw that biker again. And I think it was my son letting us see that he was still there, he was still with us. And I've seen him twice in a distance, and apparently this is what happens. You don't realise till you've lost a child that things like this happen, or somebody who's very, very close to you. And they make it seem. And so we had the memorial, and I did the service, because I would have liked a church service. As I say, I am religious. But what happened was, when we took his clothes to the Christian church, that I'd stayed back. Paul and his dad had gone into the car. I'd stayed back to say prayers, and I heard voices. And I'd gone to where the voice was, and I said, just to let you know, I said, my son's died, and I said, I've brought all these belongings so that hopefully it can help somebody else. And she said, look, she says, the priest's due any minute. Would you like to come in and wait? I said, yes, I would. And I went in and waited, and there was a Swedish priest, and he came in and he took me to a room, and him and I said quiet prayers together. And when I got back in the car, I thought, do you know what? We might not get exactly what we want, but I got as close as damn it. You know, and we have to step back and just look at what we do get. And it, to me, it was very touching. And that night with the bikers, there was 90 people turned up for that memorial, and he'd only been in Dubai 3 years. And some of the racing crowd who he knew, there was a race on, so they couldn't be there. So it was amazing. And one of the bikers, he had done all the photographs. They put a big picture of Stephen, exquisite white roses, I've never seen anything like it, put food on for everybody, and I felt part of a community. Stephen had he'd given us this gift. And people say about faiths and not getting along. In Dubai there's 170, or there was then, 170 different nationalities living together. And to see, I mean, his friends were from all over the world. And the one thing that brought them together was being a biker, a Harley Davidson owner. And the love, the care we got us through that week. And it suddenly, it changed me, I think, because I realised you shouldn't be blinkered. You've got to be open-minded and welcome. You know, don't judge people by one person. So we had to arrange for an undertaker. And I said, do you know, something's telling me, I'm sure I've seen a Harley hearse. And we Googled it in Dubai. Where was that Harley hearse? Here in Sunderland. And we contacted the undertaker, and he said, oh, friend of mine, yeah, no problem, we can get that for you. So we left Dubai. It was hard because I felt
it's okay.
I felt we left his spirit in Dubai. Stephen never wanted to come back to the UK. Never, ever. They had given him, all these different people had given him so much love and so much friendship that he realised the gift, what he'd got there. And I certainly felt the same, definitely. Anyway, we we travelled back to the UK. Undertakers were waiting at Newcastle, and the steward on the plane had made sure we both went up to business class, although the one in charge was adamant she didn't want us there, but never mind, he was insistent. And it was a difficult journey, knowing that Stephen's body was in the hold. And I had to go home, and it just hit me, because there was a huge pile. Everybody had heard by then. All the bereavement cards were there, and it just hit home. I think we'd had so much to do, and we had so much support in Dubai. It had kept us going. It did give us the momentum for the next stage and the next stage. And wait a minute, we just need a tissue.
Right.
So I went to church on the Sunday, and the priest, he says, I've heard about the tragedy. He says it's terrible, and we got talking, and I told him about the bikers, and I was just so full of it, because they'd helped me through it. And I said, we've got a Harley hearse for his funeral. I said, I would have loved a biker's escort. He says, my friend's has a Harley. Would you like me to ask him? I says, yes, that would be brilliant. And what happened was, on the day, 26 bikers, and 4 of which actually knew Stephen personally, which was amazing. And we were leaving, just about to leave the house, and this biker came up to me and he said, would you like a biker's salute? I thought, I haven't a clue what a biker's salute is. But yeah, I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound, we'll have the works. And so I thought nothing more about it. Everybody was amazed. And the church was absolutely packed. And when I got divorced, my family ostracised me. They never spoke since. And they let me walk behind his coffin on my own, which was hard. Paul and his dad were carrying the coffin with cousins, but nobody walked with me.
Goodness.
And I'd had a word with the priest beforehand. I did his eulogy. I said, I brought him into this world. It's the last thing I can do for him, and I'll do it. And he said, well, look, I'm here. I've got it with me. He said, if at any time I'll take over, which I was very grateful for, but he didn't need to. And we went to the crematorium, and everybody stands outside, and they had the coffin there, but nobody was doing anything. And I can tell you, it wasn't just me, my insides were shaking. I've never experienced anything like it. And I was thinking, what's the matter? I couldn't see what was going on. And suddenly, the 26 bikers revved their engines. And I just thought, do you know what? He would have loved this. Absolutely loved it. Well, 4 days after his funeral, well, it was 5 actually, it was on the Friday, I lost it big time. And I think I'd cried from 10 in the morning till about 3, 4 in the afternoon. And I heard a voice saying, go to the beach. I thought, I like going to the beach. I'll go to Roker. No, go to South Shields. Really, I said, do I have to go to South Shields? Yes. So I can't go to work. No. Okay, all right then. So I got the dog and I drove down, and on my way down I got a phone call, so I pulled in, took the call, and it was my niece, and she said we were at the hospital the day before with our daughter, and this lady was sitting next to her, and she'd said, I've got to say this. She said, I'm training to be a medium, and I've got this man coming through. She said, oh, it would be my granda. She said, was his funeral on Monday? She said, no, that was my cousin's. She says, well, he wants you to tell them that he loved his funeral. But there was one person there he hated. I knew straight away. He never saw eye to eye with his headmistress, and she was there. And when she told me that, and it eased, I'm still crying, but it was a bit easier. So I went to South Shields, to Notriani on the front, got my coffee with the dog, sat there, and a lady on a Harley pulled up. Well, you don't often see many women because it's so heavy. And I thought, I'm going to have this coffee, because we'd raised over £1,000 at the funeral. And I thought, if we could just get it to the 1,500. Well, I had his biker's jacket and all his Harley things, what he'd had in England. And I thought, I'm not sending them to the charity shop. I wanted somewhere to sell them. So I had my coffee and I went over to her and I said, I wonder if you could help me. I said, and I explained how he died and everything. And she said, look, give us your details, leave it with me, and I'll get back to you. Well, the dog and I must have only walked 10 minutes, and the phone rang. And it was a guy, and he was president of the Geordie chapter of the Harley Davidsons. And he said, I knew Steve. He says, he sold me my first bike. He said, look, leave it with me. He said, I'll get back to you. Anyway, as it turned out, the Geordie chapter would do an auction, and myself and my friend, who had been there, she'd been my strength once I'd got home, her brother has a Harley, so I thought she was quite appropriate for the person to go with me. She'd appreciate it. So her and I went off to the Geordie chapter to the auction. There must have been over 100 big, the banner was there, and I said, do you know what, he'll be looking down thinking, yes, because he loved me to experience everything he had. He'd actually taken me out one night on a Harley. He says, Mum, you've got to do it, I might never get a two-seater again. And he said, so come on, because he used to work for Harley. We went and raised enough, and we were able to give £1,500 we gave 500 to blood bikes, 500 to the air ambulance, and 500 for the British Bikers Foundation for families. So hopefully his legacy will have helped people. And I think throughout the world he'd done bikers, the Bikers Week in, I think it was Thailand, and also in, was it Singapore? He'd done it. But the bikers he'd met, I mean, I still get the tattoo artist wishes me happy birthday from Thailand, because he'd allowed him to tattoo somebody, one of his friends, you know. Stephen could encourage anybody to allow him to do anything. And so there was so much came out of such tragedy. And I could see that when I got there, I realised it was his time. He had told me on his 29th birthday, he said, Mum, he said, I don't want to be 30. I don't want to get old. And yet, when he died, I heard the song from the Rumbalas and the Spirits, and it says that he had guns in his head and they wouldn't go. Well, it had broken back, broken neck, and a brain hemorrhage. So that was that. He had spirits in his head and they wouldn't go. Obviously they were coming to take him. He didn't want to live forever, but he wanted to be alive. And to me, that was very important, because when he'd been 25, he had tried to commit suicide through being bullied at work, and a girl two-timed him, and she'd played with his mind. And so to know that it was out of his control, I accepted it. And I think also when I drove down to the undertakers that Monday morning to see the coroner, on the news was there'd been an 18-year-old boy died that weekend. And I thought, do you know what? Don't think about what you're missing out on. Think about what you've had.
Yeah.
And that's when I was very grateful and appreciated the 29 years I'd had with them. So from that, 2 years later, I eventually had open heart surgery after he'd come in a dream to take me home.
Let's take a pause.
Right, I'll have my hot chocolate.
That's cold chocolate now, isn't it? So we've had a little break.
Yeah.
Because I've done no interviewing, because you've just been speaking so eloquently and just telling us your story, which is wonderful. Makes my job incredibly easy. You've obviously gone through a lot of adversity and some very big life events.
Yes.
And you've learnt a lot of different ways of dealing with that and coping with that.
Yes.
And I know that you now provide a lot of holistic therapy services.
Yes.
And are the author of a number of books.
Yes.
So I'd like to get onto that.
Right.
If we can.
I've got my books.
Excellent. And just start with, I guess, what made you want to write a book? What was it that kind of drove you for that to write that first book?
I didn't intentionally set out to write it. I actually developed pneumonia in 2016, January. I'd taken the dog for a walk on the morning. It was freezing fog. By lunchtime I didn't feel very well. By tea time I felt absolutely ill, and it just hit me like that. And I was really, it took me 6 months, but in those 6 months I had no energy. I couldn't walk. I had, literally it was awful. But what I class as downloads, things would drop it. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't doing anything ideal, and things would just drop in. And I had a notebook and I started writing. And by the time I was well, I had half a book. A month later, Stephen died. And it was in the October, I was talking to a priest, and she said, do you know you should write a book? She said, how you look at things is so different to most people. And she said she thought it would be beneficial. Well, I thought, right, okay. And I started to write, and I wrote from the moment I got the phone call that Stephen had died to his first anniversary. Because not only had I to deal with his death and grieving, but I was also dealing with the narcissist again. And when somebody gets the undertaker to lie to you where your son's ashes can go, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. And
that's when you listen to your gut. And when I'd gone into the undertakers that day, and he said, then he showed me a plot. He showed me a plot on his phone and said, oh, this would be lovely. No. And I left the undertakers, and I went to the graveyard, stood at my mum's grave where he was going into. We'd all agreed it. And I said, if you're not meant to go in here, I'll accept it. But if you are, can you give me a sign? And something told me to go to the priest's house, because it was different. It was a different parish to where we'd had the funeral. Right. And I went to the priest's house and I said, could you help me? I said, the undertaker has told me that my son's ashes can't go in my mum's grave. He says, well, that's exactly where I would have said they should go. I says, thank you very much. He says, get rid of the undertakers. There's the person to go to for the headstone, and we'll sort out the rest. And I said, thank you very much. And I went back to the undertakers and I said, how low can you get to lie to a mother where a son's ashes can go? I says, you've hit rock bottom here. And he said, did you go? I says, of course I went. I says, a mum just doesn't take things for granted. She needs to know for certain herself. And they never thought I'd check up, but I did. And I'm very grateful I did.
It boggles my mind why people try.
Oh yes,
just what they've got to lose, what they're trying to gain, or what they've got to gain from it. It's very strange.
Right. Well, he has taken over the grave. So now I know Stephen's with me. I've had so many signs. I just have to, sometimes in a day, oh, I haven't seen anything. Instant, I get. And I think, right, okay, you're there. And so I keep the flowers at home. I think that doesn't. He will not get to me in that way. Mm-hmm. He will not use my dead son to get at me. No way. So yes, so that was the first book.
So what was the title of the first book?
That was Only Dead Fish Go With The Flow.
Okay.
But we have...
And you handily have a copy with you?
We have a copy.
Oh, fantastic.
This is...
Okay.
Right. So then I tried, and as I say, did the book.
So would you feel that that book was kind of a cathartic mechanism?
Very.
To kind of help
I think
overcome
they all
that first year?
I think they all have in some way. And I think also I have realised it's helped others. It's helped others who've been in a narcissistic relationship to identify it, because I didn't know I was in one till 6 years after. I was watching Loose Women on the telly and I heard them describe it and I'm thinking, God, that's him. A narcissist was never talked about. We only seem to have titles now for people. We never used to, you know, and I think, in fact, one lady, it came to me by somebody coming to me for a one-to-one session for life coaching. She happened to say her friend had recommended me because she'd read my book, had seen about this, realised she was in a narcissistic relationship, and when her mother came from Australia, when he went off to work, she packed her bags and went to Australia.
Goodness.
And left him. But it's hard to get away. I mean, I tried. I met him at 16. I tried to get rid at 19, at 32, and eventually at 49. I knew it would take a lot, but I eventually got there, you know. So yeah, so this book, I tried 16 times to upload it, but I was using my married name. And when I'd gone in for my heart bypass, when Stephen had come to take me home in a dream, and I said I couldn't go, and eventually I had the heart bypass, and I was readmitted. And one of my visitors had brought me this book, Through the Darkness, and it's a nun's story about how she'd been in a convent. She was about to take her final vows, but she could see spirit, and she knew it was against the Roman Catholic faith. But she used to go out into the community and help people. And she'd helped a couple who'd lost a daughter. And they'd been so grateful. And anyway, when she'd had a word with the Catholic father and said, what she was doing. And he said, you know, not everybody's meant to be in the convent. Maybe you're supposed to be out into the community. And this couple had been so grateful at what she'd given them with regards to our daughter being still there in spirit, still with them. They'd given her a large cheque, and she'd started up a spiritualist church in New York, and apparently I think it's still there today. She comes to the college down in London to give talks. And when I was in James Cook, I was thinking, through the darkness, gosh, I've been through enough darkness going through this, because I did my whole journey on my own. When I was in the ambulance being transferred from Durham to James Cook, I rang my sister to tell her, and she said, well, sorry, but we'll not be coming to visit you. And I said, that's fine, don't worry. And when I'd gone into James Cook, I sent a little prayer up and I said, right, God, it's just you and me. Can you please carry me till I can walk again? And I'd said to the staff, I said, do you think I could have a word with the chaplain before I go to theatre? And I said, oh yes, no problem. Then I got transferred that day. So I got the other ward and I said, I don't know if the other ward told you, I would like to see the chaplain before I go down to theatre. They said, I think he's in the hospital today. Anyway, he came not long after, and he pulled the curtains around the bed. And I was telling him how Stephen had come in a dream to take me home, how I was seeing my dead relatives sitting by my bedside. I used to wake up during the night and they were there sitting at my bedside. It used to fight the life out of me to think that in some way it was comforting, and in other ways thinking, am I really going, you know? And he said to me, look, if it's my son's wedding, if I'm here when you go to theatre, I'll come and see you before you go down. Well, I was actually in that ward 16 days before my operation, and this night I was not very well, and they said, look, somebody hasn't turned up, there's a side ward for you, we'll put you there. And I said, well, I'd really appreciate it, because it was a busy ward, it was noisy. And so I went, had a good sleep, and I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I saw the sun rising. Now, we had that hymn at Stephen's funeral, I watched the sunrise, and I thought, I wonder if that's an omen. Well, it was Friday the 13th. Stephen's lucky number was 13, had 13 tattooed on his bottom. And I thought, okay, I think I get this. Anyway, they came and they took me back onto the ward, and at 10 to 8, 4 doctors all in the theatre gear came in. And then the professor came to the bottom of my bed and he said, I've got a cancellation. Would you like to take it? I says, yes, I would. He said, right, we'll get you ready. You'll be second down to theatre. So it was a mad dash, because obviously they weren't expecting it. And they had me on the trolley, and I was just about to be wheeled from my bed, and this lady was at the bottom. She said, I'm from the chaplaincy. She said, would you like me to light a candle and say a prayer for you? I said, very much so, I'd really appreciate that. So off she went. And as I was going into the amphitheatre, I said, right, God, just please be there for me till I come out the other end. I would like to get out the other side, because it's 50-50. And when I was in, the anaesthetist saw my tattoo. So I have a Arabic tattoo on the wrist, which is Stephen, because I thought I wanted in Arabic because he didn't want to come back to England, and that Dubai had meant so much to him, and it was pay homage to them as well as him. And when he said, oh, Stephen, I thought, he's with me, he's here, it's his sign letting me know he's with me. So I went in, I was as calm as anything. My blood pressure was normal. I couldn't believe it, but it was normal. I was just so in the moment, I was just, yeah, I'm ready for this. Come on, let's get on with it. Well, I woke up the next morning. I felt as if I had an angel holding my hand. And as I was coming to, I had tubes all over. And I heard the nurse say, the senior nurse say, you can let go of her hand now. And I just squeezed it. She says, I think she needs me. I think she needs me to hold on. And I said, yes. And I couldn't speak. But she got my message. Slowly the tubes came out. And by lunchtime they said my SATs were so good. I didn't have to go into intensive care or high dependency like everybody goes. I was going straight back to the ward.
Right.
So they put me in the waiting area, and here comes the chaplain. He says, I've been looking all over for you. He says, I was wondering where you were. And he sat and he talked to me, and just we said what had gone on. And went back to the ward. And I had to stay a bit extra because I had a collapsed lung eventually and a heart failure. But on the day that I left, both chaplains came to my bedside. When the professor came in and he looked, as though to say, what are they doing there, sort of thing, you know. And I thought, no, that's God telling me. He's been with me every step of my journey. Because I'd gone in there, I'd been in hospital, 4 days already. I'd been taken in on a 999 call, so I had nothing with me. I had no support system, and I hadn't a clue how I'd get clean clothes, things I needed, nothing. And yet they came. It was a friend who was from the WI. She would come every 3 days, take my dirty clothes, bring my clean clothes. Other friends came and brought. Didn't see any relatives whatsoever. My son flew in for 6 hours. That was because he was committed with work, but he flew in, stayed with me 6 hours, and then flew straight back. And so it was a huge journey to do on my own, and it was quite a scary one as well, because when you cut sort of from here to here and from your thigh down to your ankle, you're not in the best of conditions, just let's say. But then they sent me home. I had nobody to look after me. I couldn't lift a cup out of a cupboard or my clothes out the wardrobe. And yet I was supposed to look after myself. 3 days later, I was back in Durham. And it was there that I realised there was something bigger going on. I'd been put on the gynae ward. And I think, why am I on gynae? And then suddenly I thought, do you know what? I think this is a rebirth. I'm having a rebirth here. It's a reset. My friend brought me my book I'd been given, Through the Darkness, and I started to read it, and things were happening, and I was connecting with. I thought, yeah, I'm supposed to read this. Anyway, this night I had terrific chest pain, and it wasn't normal chest pain. They said it was angina. I knew it wasn't. And I lay in the bed, 2 o'clock in the morning. And in the book, she talked a lot about Saint Teresa. And I thought, well, I've never used Saint Teresa before. I'll give it a go. So in the quiet of the ward, I said, Saint Teresa, if you can find out what these pains are, I would be really grateful. Eventually I went off to sleep. Next morning, got up, went to the bathroom. Little old lady came out of the bathroom and she goes, so what are you in for? I said, I'm in for I've had open heart surgery. Oh, she says, I had that 16 years ago. I says, do you know, I've had an awful night with these pains. I said, she says, I know exactly what it is. She says, I asked the surgeon. She says, it's the nerve endings knitting together. I says, that's brilliant, that. I says, that makes sense, now you've said it. She says, I bet you were a people pleaser. I bet you put everybody else before you. I says, as a matter of fact, yes, I did. She says, from now on, number one. You are number one. I said, right, okay. She says, don't forget. She says, and I'm Mary Teresa. They call me Mary, but you can call me Terry. And I just smiled and I thought, okay, I get it now. And on my last day before I left, she came and sat on my bed. She says, don't forget, number 1 from now on. And I don't know how many I've told that, because a lot of people think it's selfish, and it's not. If our cup's not full, we can't give to others. So we have to fill our cup first. And that was a mega learning. But my lessons didn't stop there. My friend had brought in a magazine. She says, this magazine was lying in the house. She said, I brought it into James Cook, but she says, I don't know if you've read it or not. And I said, no, I hadn't actually. Well, she went, and I was flicking through. In the centre pages was an article about an author who had raised to fame using her married name, although she'd been divorced 10 years. But according to America, or was it Native America, if you keep your husband's name, you still belong to him. And I thought, that's changed. And I thought, right, as soon as I can drive, I'm off to the solicitors to change my name. Mm-hmm. So a couple of friends came in and we were just having a joke. What name should I use? And we thought we had a good bit laugh. They left, and I went onto my phone and I went into Safari, and on the search bar had Guardian-Angel-Messenger. I thought, that's it, Messenger. I thought, I help others. God uses me to pass on messages. That's my name. Changed my name when I was well enough. Sat outside, somebody was walking past, and I said, you don't know anybody who's good at computers, do you? And she says, my husband writes programs, computer programs. She says, I said, do you think he could help me? She says, of course. She says, come round for tea and cake. And she says, I'll ask him. And I went round. 2 minutes, that's all it took him to check. It was about point something of an inch out. Changed it. The boot was uploaded with my new name. And I think that's what it had to be. That everything is for a reason.
And that was book 1? That
was book 1. Book 2, I had to educate people about angels and how to connect with the angelic realm. Because we all think we're alone. But when we can give our problems up for transmutation, we don't no longer have to be stressed, anxious. It's gone. And they have a much bigger plan and a better plan than what we could ever think of. And your life becomes so much easier. If you ask anybody who believes in angels, they always say, oh, I always get a car park in space. Because when you leave, I never leave the house without saying, will you go before me and protect me and everyone else on the road? And I know that if traffic lights are on red, if I'm going by train, the train's delayed, there's a bigger reason. Maybe it stops me from being in an accident. You just don't know what is ahead. And I have had that situation where the dog wanted to go out and I was going to be late for a meeting. And when I got to so far on the road, it was quite a bad piece of road. A car had just turned over on what would have been my side. Thank you.
So who would you say that book is aimed at? Who should read that book?
I would say, I think teenagers onwards, because they feel so alone and they feel misunderstood. They feel, I think a lot of people these days do. People don't seem to get them. I think it doesn't matter who you are. You can give it up, and you don't need to know which one, whatever. We are assigned a guardian angel when we are born, and that guardian angel is with us till we breathe our last breath, and then the angel of death comes and collects us. So our soul goes on. And I have had this experience I met someone, and as soon as our eyes met, I thought, we've got unfinished business. I didn't even think about it. It came in my head, we've got unfinished business. And it was so strange. And yes, I do think we do meet people, and I think maybe there's unfinished work there, and we're in this lifetime to dot the I's and cross the T's, and we will not see the bigger picture till we move on. But we have assistance to help us if only we opened our mind to it. And I think when you open your mind, all the tragedy, the illness, the whatever, there's a bigger meaning. And it makes life so much more interesting. It's fifth dimension rather than three-dimensional. There's so much more meaning to it. And I live in such peace. People say, how can you be content and peaceful when you've gone through? I have no hatred. I have nothing. I can see the bigger picture, and I know what I've gone through has made me so much stronger. It's given me so much wisdom, knowledge, that I can help others. I can alchemize that pain into purpose. Mm-hmm. And so for me, if I can help somebody else, then it was worth going through the pain. I would go through all what I've gone through again to be where I am today, without a doubt. And so an angel in my pocket definitely is to teach anybody. It's the simple things.
You say it's anybody with an interest in spirituality, with angels, it's give it a go.
I think, yeah, but even if you don't, be open-minded and just be open to it and see ask for signs, and you'll get them. And it's when I've said to people, I had in with Only Dead Fish, it was a lady from Sunderland actually read it. She'd lost a daughter. I didn't even know she'd had a daughter. And she contacted me. She said, would I have a coffee with her? And I said, yeah, I'll have a coffee with you. And I went and we were talking, and she said, I finished your book. She says, I was broken hearted. She says I went into the shower thinking, God, I've got to pull myself together here. She said, and when I went back into the bedroom, my little girl's bracelet, who died, was in the middle of the bed. She says, now, I wouldn't have thought anything till I'd read your book about the signs they leave you, to let you know that they're with you, our loved ones are with us. And she says that brought so much comfort to me to know. She says it was in my jewellery box, and yet it was on the bed when I'd been in the shower. And I said, I wished so many more people would see these things. They see the sign, they're given the signs, but they shrug them off. It's like guidance. A lot of people will be given guidance of turning left instead of right or whatever, and I think, oh no, that's the way I was going, I'm still going that way. But they don't realise what is waiting for them if they went left. Might be a lot of heartache going right, would be an easier path going left. So when we need to still our minds to hear, and it's not loud, it's a gentle whisper. But sometimes people say, oh, I get those things. I had a lady I sat next to on a plane. She'd lost her 22-year-old daughter. She'd been hearing the songs, she'd seen the white feathers, she'd seen, things that reminded her of her daughter, but she didn't realise that was her daughter letting her know that she was with her. And when I told her, she just got so much more comfort from it. And people are so destitute in grief. that they can't see these things, and sometimes we just need a little guidance. And I've experienced the darkness. Well, it was a very deep dark hole I've been in a few times, but I've also seen the signs. I've heard that when I was getting divorced, I could hear go to work. When I got there, there was proof there for me, more proof to go to court again. And so when we put it out there, accept what you're getting. Don't shrug it off. Some people will put out, say, oh, I want this manifest, and then they don't believe it when they get it. You've got to trust and have faith. And life becomes so much different.
Okay.
So my next book.
Book 3. Yep.
Well, it's book 4 because this is the second edition.
Okay.
Because I did book 3 in the first lockdown, and then I did over 300 hours personal development with Tony Robbins, from the big guru in America, and I did everything I was learning. I was going inwards and doing the work on me, and I thought, when I got to 70, I thought, do you know what, I wasn't very well that year, and I thought, I can't go with all this inside of me. I've got to update this. And so that was when this one came about. And this is your life Bible. It's whatever you're going through, you will find, from a migraine and drinking more water instead of taking tablets, because if you've got aching joints, it's quite possibly because you water deficient, you haven't consumed enough water. It's amazing how many things that happen. But from forgiveness, from gratitude, what the difference that makes, about the importance of where you come in the family, because each child, their parents are at different stages in their life, and none of them will have the same experience. And one, I've heard, well, I know my sibling was the same. They don't believe you are having your experience because they didn't have it. Their parents and their situation was different then to where it is with you. And so once you start and understand and look at your parents and what they've gone through, what did their childhood, why do they behave the way they do? Because that reflects on you. And you can either take on their habits and continue the circle of life without a break, or you can flick it and you can change for the future and for the future generations.
Okay.
So that is in here, everything. And there's a list at the back, all the different things which I believe. And it's little, it's not big things, it's not very technical, or anybody can follow it. It's how we think, how we speak, because everything is energy, and it changes what comes back to you. What you put out there comes back to you.
Okay.
So that is number 3, and the final one is my journey through heart bypass, and it's what, if anybody has heart problems, what they could do in advance, because there is things that I would have done in preparation to give you a more peaceful journey. Making a will, letting people know your passwords, where things are, because we keep everything to ourselves.
Yeah, we do.
And and if anything happens, you're stuck, absolutely stuck. You have to rely on other people. I know my brother-in-law got Alzheimer's at 58. He had his own business. Nobody knew the passwords, the banking, nothing, and it was a big struggle. So I think it's a word to anybody, and especially with the illness, it also gives you an insight to the journey, and also what you need to have in place before they send you home, which I didn't know. And it was only afterwards that I learned all this. So hopefully all my discomfort and pain will save somebody else having to go through it. And there's a checklist, what you need for hospital. Also your recovery and how to be kind to yourself. I think
so recommended reading for anybody who's going in for any kind of major operation.
Yeah. I think anybody going through anything like that, it doesn't matter whether you're 20 or whether you're 70.
Yeah.
That journey is still the same. And I think your mindset, how you're your own motivator. Nobody else can heal you. You are the healer. And it's getting into that space, the right space, to get you through it. And it's a tough one, because some days you are rock bottom. There's peaks, but there's also troughs.
Absolutely.
And so yes, so that is, and my latest one, which is on the or getting published at the moment, is What Lies Behind the Smile, and that is about all my trauma, and from being a child that was continuously told that she wasn't wanted, I was the biggest mistake, to being bullied, to humiliated by elders, by told to shut up. I didn't find my voice till maybe it was lockdown actually, when I decided to do videos to help people. That was when I started to speak up, and people think, who is she? What's she doing? They didn't realise all the training I'd done and everything else. No, but I just done it in private and just got on with it.
Was that the TikTok videos?
I do TikTok.
Yes, it was TikTok.
Well, I
think we met at a networking event a good few months ago as well. It was one of the Inspire Labs.
Yes, because
I remember you talking about you were doing your TikToks.
Well, it was the first lockdown. It was when book 3 came out, and 2 days later we were in lockdown, and I thought, well, I can't sell it in shops now, so I thought, what am I going to do? And it was coming up to Christmas. I'd lost my brother in December. Stephen's birthday was December. The interment of his ashes was December. Both my parents were lying dying, 32 years apart, over Christmas and New Year. I understood how dark Christmas can be when everybody's full of it, and the telly's full of family occasions, and you might be on your own. I mean, I've even been in India on my own on the River Ganges on Christmas Day. And it's a case of, I thought, right, I put a video out and I said, for the next 12 days, I'll be doing the 12 days of Christmas. I'm reading my book to you. And for anybody who's struggling, then tune in, follow me. And so I put that out 13 days before Christmas. I did it every day. And I couldn't understand how the numbers, really wasn't very techie then. And I was saying to myself, well, how's this happening? I don't know, Mama, I don't know. Anyway, by Christmas Day, I had 15,000 followers and 58,000 views. And I thought, if I've helped one person get through that Christmas, then it's been worthwhile. And that's what I think about everything. I do it in good faith. And I just think who's meant to read it, who's meant to see my videos, will see them. And I post on TikTok, I do YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And I just think, and some people might be critical about it, I don't care. That doesn't bother me, because they're not the person that needs it. And I think, unfortunately, we tend to hide our gifts, because we know there'll be people out there think, what do they think they're doing this? You've got to ride above that and think, do you know what? I've been given this for a reason, and I can make a difference to somebody's life. And that's what keeps me going.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Pauline. I think we're going to wrap it up because I have a lot there.
2 hours later.
What I would ask is just one final question, I guess. Obviously, you've gone through a lot of how you feel. You've given us descriptions of a lot of the life events you've gone through, and the way that your spirituality has helped you and it helps others. I guess if you had one piece of advice you would want to give anybody watching this video about how to live a happier life, a more satisfied life, what would it be? What's the best thing somebody can do to start that journey?
Focus on what you appreciate in life. Give thanks. Find on my darkest days, I used to think of something I was grateful for, and each day I found more to be grateful for, till one day that's all I could think of was things that I was grateful for. And what you put out there, you get more of. So your mind searches for positive rather than negative. So always focus on the positive, not what you haven't got, but what you have. I live in a 1-bedroom flat. I have the least possessions I've ever had, and I am the most grateful and the most content. But what I have, I really appreciate.
Excellent. I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. Thank you.